Hello, welcome along, hope you're all doing well. We are back in Microsoft Flight Simulator with a brand new tutorial, and today we're going to be going through a quick start setup from cold and dark for the INIBUILDS A300-600 on Xbox. And this is very much designed to be a basic functional guide covering the essential systems to get you off the ground. And for full disclosure, I did try making this video when the A300 was released on console a couple of weeks back, but in all honesty, the plane was bloody awful, and I was getting constant crash to desktops, weird LNAV behaviours, so yeah, very frustrating, pretty much unflyable. But we have since had an update, and whilst it's not perfect, it is now fully functioning, and it's actually really great fun. So without further ado, let's get started. So here we are in the flight deck. As you can see, we are completely cold and dark, so let's go overhead then and get things started. And to begin with, we need to fire up the ground power, which is available, so we hit that, and then we're going to switch on our batteries just here. So that's the batteries on, and if we go a little further overhead, we need to turn our IRS switches to nav, and there's 3 of those straight across the top. And if we just do a quick flow down the left hand side, we can check all our hydraulics are on. They'll be showing low pressure, that's fine. And let's switch on our seatbelt signs and also our no smoking signs. And moving across to the second panel, we'll turn on our nav lights to let the ground crew know that the plane is operational. And then moving across, we can now turn on all our fuel pumps, and there's about 500 of them, so let's get all those on. And we can also put our window heats on as well. There we go. And across to the bottom of the final panel, let's arm our emergency exit lights. And finally, we need to switch on our oxygen supply and confirm the pressure looks good, and just confirm our packs are on and showing fault. So that's all okay. And that is pretty much it for the overhead panel for now. So let's take a look at our displays, and as you can see, all our avionics are initializing, so that's all worked nicely. And over to the EFB then, we hit the My Flight icon where we can import our flight plan from SimBrief, and there we go. That also gives us our live METAR, and also it gives us our routing shown at the bottom. Okay, so let's turn our attention to the FMS then, because we need to align the IRS as that message shows. So we pop our route in, actually let's just clear that. We pop our route in, which is EGBB here in Birmingham, and we're going to be flying to Edinburgh, which is EGPH, and we drop that in at the top right, and then we hit return. And as you can see, that gives us an align IRS button, which we press, and that'll just take a few minutes to align those. So whilst we're waiting for that to happen, we can turn our attention to our init page. So our cost index is going to be 23, so we can add that in, and also our cruise altitude is going to be flight level 280, so we'll add that in. And our flight number is Monarch MON 107, so that can go in as well. And finally, our average winds are 244 degrees at 049 knots, so we can drop those in as well. And that completes our first init page. So if we go next page, this is all our weights and fuel for the flight. So we need to head back over to the EFB, and if we just press the home button, we can come across to weight and balance, and again we can import that from SimBrief, and there we go, that pulls all the data from our flight plan, and then we apply load to aircraft, and there we go, we get the red cog telling us how long it's going to be till our fuel is loaded on. We can finish that immediately or just let it run. I'll let it run so we can have a bit of time to set up our flight plan. So we'll press the flight plan button and hit the EGBB for our departure, followed by the SID button, and we're going to be departing on runway 15, so we hit that first, and we're going to be departing on the Loveland 1 Yankee SID, so we press that and insert, and there we go, there's all our waypoints for our departure. And if we scroll all the way down to Edinburgh for our arrival, we can also plan our star, so let's hit EGPH, followed by the star button, and we're going to be landing on ILS 24 via the INPIT 1 Echo star, so we insert that, and there we go, there's all our waypoints for our arrival. So back over to the EFB then, and let's just hit the home button and back to the My Flight tab, and just to double check our routing. So we want to be going direct to TNT after Lotham, so we'll input that. So it's TNT, and we'll drop that in under Lotham like so, and that'll be the top one there. So that's our next waypoint, and then we can choose our airway from TNT, which is November 57, and we are going to be going to Hull, so we can add that in as well. Excellent. So all we need to do now is just resolve that discontinuity there. So if we hit the clear button and enter that, that sort of tidies everything up nicely. So we are just waiting for the IRS to align, so that's going to take another couple of minutes. So while we wait for that, let's just have a double check on how our fueling is getting on. So back to the init page and next, and we can see the fueling is still creeping up, so we should be just about there. So if we head back to the EFB, and yeah, there's only a few seconds to go on the fueling, so if we go back to the home page and back into the weights and balance page, yeah, there's just a few kilos to go. So once that's all loaded on board, we can head back over to the FMS and start populating our weights. Okay, there we go, that's completed then. So all our fuel is on board, and we will go back down to the FMS and start adding in our weight. So we'll hit the block fuel, followed by the 0 fuel weight, and that also calculates our gross weight for takeoff. And we need to also add in our 0 fuel weight centre of gravity. So back to the EFB and back to the home page, and now we're going to press the performance button, and then we're going to press the sync button next to conditions, which brings in all our weather and QNH, and then we can press the calculate button under the config, which calculates our V speeds. And there we go, if we look at the top there, we've got all our V speeds, and down towards the bottom you will see our centre of gravity, which we need, which is 30.3%. So we'll pop back down to the FMS to drop that in, which is 30, and there we go, right on cue, our IRS is now aligned, so we can clear that message. As you can see, the nav display's come alive, so we'll clear that, and let's finish inputting our centre of gravity. So 30.3, and we can drop that in on the right hand side there. Perfect, so that is our init page is complete. So we can turn our attentions to our takeoff performance page. So if we hit the TO/approach, there we can see we can now add in our V speeds for takeoff. So back over to the EFB, there's all our V speeds and our flex temperature. So just before we input those, we need to head back overhead, and we will switch on our ATS levers, our yaw damper, and also our pitch trim need to go on. And at that point the FCU all comes alive, so we can start setting up our autopilot. But first let's add in our flex temp, which was 63 degrees, so we hit the flex button and scroll that round to 63. Okay, one more. There we go, so that's our flex temp input. And back to the EFB to check our V speed. So we've got a V1 of 150 and rotate 150 and V2 153. So let's go 150 for our V1 and drop that in top left. And then we've got 150 for our rotate. And as you can see, the V2 speed is brought in from the FCU, so we need to go up to the FCU to add in our V2. So we dial that in the map speed. So let's scroll that round to 153, and then what we need to do is we need to right click, which presets that into the FMS. So we click that and we get a little white preset light come on, and as we look at the FMS now, we can see that's pulling in 153 knots from the FCU, so that's worked nicely. And once that is preset, we can then add in any speed constraints for our departure. So let's check some charts, and this is where the INIBUILDS A300 really is a success story. We have Navigraph integration within the EFB, which is a bit of a game changer for me, to be honest, and it works really well. So as you can see, obviously you do need to have a Navigraph subscription, but if you have, then this is going to work really nicely for you. So we can start pinning our charts as we would normally on Navigraph. So we'll have the airport, and we'll also have our SID, which we have here. So let's pin that, which is the November 1 Yankee. So as you can see there, we've got a max speed of 250 knots below 10,000 feet. So back over to the FCU, we can input 250 knots into the window. So let's scroll that round like that, all the way up to 250. And there we go, that's 250 knots. And if we check down on the FMS, we still have our 153 preset, so that hasn't affected that. So let's drop 6,000 feet in for our constraint at Lotham. And also let's put in our runway heading, which is, let's have a quick check of the charts. We've already got 156 degrees, so let's add in that to our FCU as well. So we just scroll that round to 156, there we go. And we also need to set our decision height to -5 for departure, and that's the same on the first officer side, so we'll do that. And we also need to set our airport elevation, so back to the chart and double check, that should be at the top of the info. So we've got 339 feet, so we'll round that up to 350 and add that in, and that is located just above where we did the flex earlier. That's the wrong way. So that's 1, 2, 3.5. So that's close enough. That's our airport elevation set. And that is pretty much it. We just need to pre-select, let's put LNAV on, or nav, and also profile, which is the VNAV. It's not letting me do that. Okay, well, we'll go with the level change then, that'll do. And lastly, we need to just set our QNH for our departure. So if I head back over to the EFB, hit the home button, and back to my flight, there's our QNH 1009. So let's go back and just scroll that in to the altimeter, 1009, and we'll match it on that one as well. Okay, so that is our QNH all set as well. And that is pretty much it. We're about ready for pushback, so we can think about starting the APU. So back overhead then, let's get the APU up and running. So what we need to do is, let's just zoom in a little bit, we need to get the APU master switch on. We wait a couple of seconds and then press the start button. That will fire up the APU, and we can actually monitor that if we come down and hit the APU button down there and just zoom in on this display, and it will give us all the information on the APU. And we're just waiting for the blue APU bleed available light to come on, and if we hop outside we can just double check that everything is as it should be. I can certainly hear the APU, so that's all promising. That sounds really nice actually. And there we go, our APU bleed is available now. So if we head back overhead, we can switch the APU bleed on, which is right over on the right hand side here. We just switch that on there. So APU bleed is on. We can disconnect the ground power, so let's switch that off. And back down to the EFB, hit the home button again. And we're going to go to ground equipment and toggle the ground power, so that's disconnected. Perfect. Now let's arm all our doors, and we should get all red lights for the doors locking. So that's all those sorted, and we are about ready for pushback. So let's switch our parking brake off. There we go. and we can hit the pushback button on the EFB, which is controlled by these 3 little arrows here. So let's click the backward button, and that says pushback started. And if we hop outside, we can monitor the tug, see what he's up to. For some reason it's showing that our chocks are still in place, even though I haven't got those toggled, so let's go back to the EFB and toggle those. There we go, that's removed the chocks, so that's all good. Not going to get very far with those on. And as this is a quick start guide, let's have a quick time check. What are we on? 15.5 minutes from cold and dark to pushback, so I'm pretty happy with that. Let's get some beacon lights on and we can think about starting some engines. So back overhead, and let's pop our beacon on, and we'll turn our engine starter switch to A, and we'll hit engine 2 start, and we're going to just monitor our N2 figure, and as that gets around about 20%, we will inject some fuel to start the engines. And just while we're waiting for that, let's have a quick look outside just to see how our pushback is coming along. That's all looking good. Just a few more meters before we start turning left. Okay, so the N2 is set, so fuel lever 2 on, and that should fire up engine 2. Okay, so let's turn the pushback tug left, which makes our nose go to the right, which is correct. And as we can see now, engine 2 is firing up nicely, the spinner's going round, so looks like we've got a good start on engine 2. Okay, so let's repeat the process for engine 1 then. We'll turn the engine starter mode to B and hit the engine 1 start button. And again, we're just going to monitor the N2 until it gets to around about 20% before switching the fuel lever on. And we're about there with our pushback, so let's come over to the EFB and stop the tug. There we go, that has stopped pushback. So we will switch the parking brake on, parking brake set, and our N2 is now at around about 20%, so we can switch our engine 1 fuel lever on. Okay, let's hop outside and check engine 1. And as we can see, that's spooling up quite nicely too, so we have a good start on engine 1. And if we just head down and check our systems, we've got a good start on both engines, so that's all looking good. There we go, and if we take a look at the overhead panel, we can confirm that the Gen 1 and Gen 2 buttons are running correctly, and we can extinguish any other lights. We'll put our probe heats on as well. Okay, we can switch the APU bleed off, and also the APU master switch can go off, and we'll turn our engine start mode to continuous, and we are about ready to taxi. So let's get some taxi lights on. There we go. Okay, so just before we taxi, we need to set our trim for takeoff. So if we go back to the EFB and come into our performance page, you can see down the bottom there, that's our takeoff trim, which is 0.0 up. And it's a little bit tricky to see on the A300, but if we scroll the wheel down, we can just see the 0 there, and that's 0.0 up there. And we also need to set our slats and flaps for takeoff, which was slats 15 and flaps 15, so that's the centre position there, so let's set that, that's all good. And we'll also set our auto brake to max for takeoff, which is in the centre here. And we can also run our takeoff config test, which is this little round button to the right of the throttle levers, and that's all looking good. And let's just check our flight control surfaces, so we'll bring that menu up and we'll go full left and back to centre, and we'll go full right and back to centre, and full forward, back to centre, and full back and back to centre, and we'll do a quick couple of pumps on our rudder pedals, and that's all looking good. Okay. And we'll just pop our engine display back up so we can monitor that. Okay, parking brake off, and let's give it a little bit of thrust just to get us rolling. And here we go. Let's taxi out to runway 15. Okay, so we'll put our airport charts up as well, just so we can monitor our taxi. It's a really handy feature to have because it gives us our position, gives us a little blue plane, and we can see exactly what taxi route we need to take. So it just helps with situational awareness, especially if you're on an airport that you're sort of unfamiliar with. So yeah, it's really cool. Okay then, so at this point I think I'm going to just speed up the time a little bit just while we taxi out to our hold point, and we'll catch up again when we're at our hold short on runway 15. Okay, so we're just approaching our hold short, so let's get our departure charts on screen. Okay, and zoom in a little bit. There we go. Right, so let's bring it to a halt so we can just do our final preparations for takeoff. And we want to go taxi lights to takeoff, and we'll pop our strobes on, and our takeoff lights on, and our runway turn-off lights on as well. Yeah, everything else is looking good. Let's pop our TCAS on. There we go. And we need to arm our ground spoilers for takeoff. Check. Okay, parking brake off. And let's just give it a little thrust. Okay, let's do it. And let's just see if we can get lined up nicely on our centre line. This is looking pretty good. Okay, this is the fun bit. So we're just going to hold it on the brakes, and we'll go 40% thrust and some downward nose wheel pressure, and toga. Those engines sounding really great. They've done a cracking job with those. And that's 80 knots. And just try and maintain that centre line. And V1 rotate. Positive rate, gear up, and I'm just going to keep hand flying it for the start of our SID. And autopilot 1 engaged. Okay, that seems to be behaving itself. Sometimes what you'll have is it gets a little bit confused on the SID, and you just need to flip it into heading select mode and try and follow the charts as best you can. And landing gear lever to the neutral position. And let's do a quick recall. Okay, that's all normal. So let's retract our flaps. And LNAV does seem to be working correctly, and if we take a look at our charts for our departure, we can see our position. Just scroll that across. We can see our actual position on the chart, and the little purple plane is following the line quite nicely. And if you do have any problems, just manage those turns manually using the heading select mode, as I mentioned. Look at that though, that looks fantastic. And as I said before, I think INIBUILDS have done a great job with the Navigraph integration. It really adds another level of immersion. Let's kill the runway turn-off lights, and engine start mode off, and we'll also turn our takeoff lights off. Okay. Okay, so that concludes today's quick start guide for the INIBUILDS A300-600. I hope you enjoyed it, found it useful. If you did learn something new, give it a like, subscribe, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks very much for watching. Bye bye.